What's going on, everyone? Today, 70% of the S&P 500 closed up in the green, but as we all know, it was certainly not all sunshine and rainbows, as some stocks like Nvidia fell by 17%, which equated to $600 billion in market cap, which is actually the largest one-day drop of any company in history. So in today's video, we're going to cover everything that's going on in the market right now, what's going on with this DeepSeek situation, and what it means for stocks going forward. We have so much to talk about today, not only because of the recent news, but also because of the major earnings that we have set to report later in the week, as well as the interest rate decision and Powell's speech.
Yeah, this is going to be a crazy week, Mike, and we really kicked it off in a crazy way today. I could not believe how much the SPY gapped down into this morning, and everybody was freaking out going, oh my gosh, what is going on? I just circled the pre-market gap down on SPY, and it actually gapped down so much that it makes the charts look kind of weird, right? In after hours Friday, SPY was sitting around 607.50, very close to there. In pre-market today, fell all the way under 590. That's how low the SPY actually ended up dropping. Now, it did come back and recover up a little bit throughout the day and closed right around the $600 mark. But Mike, everybody's talking about what's going on with Nvidia this morning is they really led the way, closed down almost 17%, and apparently DeepSeek really stole the headlines here as they're making some ChatGPT-like AI models that they're costing them under $6 million to make, whereas as we know, some of these companies in the US are spending hundreds of millions, if not even billions of dollars developing some of these AIs. So I don't know, sounds like a big difference, but there's a lot that goes into this, that's for sure.
Exactly. So it's definitely a very unique situation, we'll say. And I think the main concern that is on people's minds right now is that the fact that DeepSeek can, let's say, supposedly create a somewhat similar AI for only the cost of like $6 million, it really scares a lot of people in the sense that, there could be a lot more competition with AI than originally thought. With that being said, DeepSeek is like a Chinese AI lab, and, you have to take everything that is put out there with a grain of salt. Of course, the cost that they had to develop their AI is kind of misleading because they actually trained their AI based off of Meta's AI. So it's just like, yes, they have a good AI right now, but there's a lot of stipulations that go along with it, and it's certainly not as what it seems.
Yeah, I know, right? And I really think that a lot of traders today are scratching their heads and they're like, hey, what is going on here? Like, is this just a big overreaction in the market? And I thought it was kind of crazy how there was that big drop out of futures last night. And then this morning, we just had such a large drop in pre-market. It had a lot of people scratching their heads because, as we know, a lot of retail traders don't even like trade pre-market. So it's kind of funny, but there was definitely a big push to the downside today. And either way, we're going to need to adapt into this and look at this in the short term because we have all these big earnings coming up this week. We have Tesla, Meta, Microsoft on Wednesday, Apple and Intel on Thursday in the tech sector. So, we could see tech maybe make a turnaround by the end of the week. So we have to keep that in mind as well. The earnings can always change things, but this is something that needs to be looked at closely, and especially for the overall market as well, dropping back under $600, that's just such a bearish sign to see in the short term after all the good progress we saw last week.
Yeah, I mean, last week we were at new all-time highs, and now here we are having Nvidia's largest drop in market history. So it really goes to show you how quickly things can change, and things are going to continue to change at a more rapid pace as the week goes on, because like you said, earnings and then everything else we have on the schedule. But talking a little bit more about this AI situation, there are some real concerns. Like when you have Nvidia down 17% on the day, whether you you like the news with DeepSeek or you don't, a 17% drop is nothing to ignore. DeepSeek's app actually overtook ChatGPT's app on the Apple App Store, which, was certainly somewhat concerning. And like when we look at the heat map, we could see that most tech-related names, especially related to like AI and, power generation and chips and anything like that, got hit very hard. So companies like Oracle, Avgo, Nvidia, stocks like that are selling off brutally. And if we continue to see these stocks put more and more pressure on their lows, it is only going to create more panic and just more fear and then just more falling prices. So it is worth understanding that as we head throughout the rest of the week, the more panic that we see, the worse the situation is going to get. And that can be demonstrated perfectly by looking at basically any major market, I don't want to say crash, but any major market pullback that we've seen not only over the past few years, but honestly as far back as you want to go. So yeah, it's going to be a hell of a week.
It really is, and I think that this could even become more accelerated. We start to see a lot of these gap downs on the charts, and some of them end up leading to like multiple weeks and multiple months sometimes of downtrend. Does that mean that that's going to happen this time? I'm not quite sure yet. We're going to have to see how it ends up playing out. But for tomorrow and the short term, there's definitely some big levels I'm watching, like on Nvidia. There is a peak here where we've seen a lot of bounces right around the low of today, right around 117. If we end up seeing a pretty good push under that for tomorrow, that will be a bearish sign. And there was a pretty good double bottom around that area today. So that's going to be on watch for tomorrow and the next few days, that's for sure. If we see a big push under there, we might need to become a little bit more bearish again and maybe adapt back down.
Yeah, and then as we know, what NVIDIA does is not something to just be ignored, especially considering how big of an influence that NVIDIA has on the S&P 500 by itself. So at many points, NVIDIA was actually the most influential company in the S&P 500, but it fell all the way down to third place today, where Apple's number one, Microsoft's number two, and now NVIDIA's number three. But basically, as we look at the levels that you mentioned, Tom, like if we do see a break below 117, not only will it be a bad sign for NVIDIA, but it'll also be definitely a big warning sign for the market as a whole. And the same thing, of course, goes in reverse, where if we see a strong hold of this support level, it can bring in a lot of supportive, buying pressure and just positive flows. So yeah, I mean, this level is very important.
It definitely is, Mike, and I know that going forward from here, there's a lot of other stocks that are kind of seeing fallout from this as well. I know that you mentioned, on the heat map, a lot of different companies there, but we can even look at a lot of these growth stocks from the short term, and we're seeing a lot of these stocks starting to turn over. You can see my watch list on the left side of your screen. Even uranium stocks, like an ETF URA, down 11%. We're seeing stocks like MU, tech stocks down. Oklo, the nuclear stocks are down a ton today as well over 10%, even WULF. So we're seeing a lot of pullbacks out there, even out of some of these growth stocks. And I will mention, Mike, even crypto took a pretty big hit. Like, look at Bitcoin from Sunday night into today. It fell under 100,000 early this morning, but ended up closing a little bit above it.
Yeah, and a lot of times the biggest, best opportunities happen during times of extreme panic. So, if there are names out there that you've been, wanting to get into, you don't have to jump into them right away, but, maybe keep them on your watch list. So, if they reach the prices that you'd be comfortable owning them at, you might get some nice buying opportunities. And, at the same time, during times of panic, you have the biggest, strongest moves to the downside, where I saw multiple tickers today that had options moves of multiple thousands of percent. So, there are multiple opportunities that come along with this, some short term and some like more medium to long term. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of things that pop up during times like this one. We're going to cover all of these and more in the nightly video. So of course, continue to tune in. But looking more closely at the earnings lineup for this week, Tom, we cannot ignore that. We have a huge lineup.
Yeah, we definitely do. And tomorrow morning, there's going to be a lot of big stocks reporting, and they're not necessarily like the big tech stocks like Apple or Tesla, like we're going to see Wednesday and Thursday, but they are fairly large. So Boeing is reporting tomorrow morning, along with General Motors, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. I thought that some of these were very interesting. I saw some talk with Trump talking about the Iron Dome recently, which could help Raytheon a little bit. It would be interesting to see them maybe mention something like that at their earnings for the future or something along those lines. Royal Caribbean will be reporting tomorrow morning as well, with Starbucks in after hours. But of course, the big tech stocks are Wednesday, like we said, Tesla, Meta, Microsoft, and then Apple and Intel on Thursday there. But Mike, for tomorrow, like Boeing, we've been seeing a lot of hype with some of these stocks in the short term as well.
No doubt. So, yeah, definitely keep all of these earnings stocks close on watch. They're going to move big and they're going to move crazily. And, of course, they are going to have an impact on the market itself as well. As we go on throughout the week, the earnings is going to get crazier and crazier with those big tech stocks. But on top of that, Tom, like it seems like every time we cover something important, there's just something even more important to talk about. And that is the FOMC interest rate decision on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So basically, the big man, Jerome Powell's coming back. We are going to have an interest rate decision. Right now, there's over a 97% chance that interest rates are just going to stay exactly the same. But of course, what Jerome Powell says and how he says it will have a big impact on the entire market. So days like Wednesday are some of the most important market days that you get. And it's only even made crazier given that it is the first FOMC press conference since Trump's inauguration, but also given this recent panic that we've seen as well.
Yeah, the panic is really going to make people look at what they say very, very closely, especially regarding inflation and everything like that. So definitely keep that on the radar for Wednesday. There is even durable goods orders 1 hour before the market opens tomorrow. But based off the news and everything today, I think that that's going to get overshadowed by some of this crazy price action that we've been seeing in the short term.
There we go. All right, Tom, well, let's get right into the good stuff then, which are some SPY levels and analysis for tomorrow. So what are you seeing with the charts?
Yeah, the SPY had a pretty crazy close today. Like I talked about earlier, closed right around the key $600 mark. So we have to keep that on the radar for tomorrow. If we can see a clear push, and I would say above like $600.50, which is right around the high in after hours, if we can see a clear push past there, that's where I will become a little bit more bullish on the SPY. But I thought that the way that SPY pushed towards 600 was very interesting. This is right around where SPY opened up pre-market. And of course, we know that $600 is a major psychological level. So if SPY cannot get past this tomorrow, that's going to be a very important deal. As far as supports coming up, I thought that this quadruple bottom in the middle of the day today on SPY, very close to 596 to 596.20, is going to be crucial as well. If this ends up breaking down, that is an area where I will become more bearish on the SPY, and I will target 595, 594, and then ultimately 590 if we do end up seeing that breakdown. In pre-market today, SPY did end up getting down to that 590 mark, so that has to be on the radar as well. But just keep in mind, SPY was so volatile today that that volatility, Mike, was just so great that that can account for multiple days worth of movement. Like, we have to realize we just wiped out like 2 weeks of SPY's movement there.
And another thing too is like it's worth keeping in mind that how the market is moving now affects how it will move in the future. So for example, if we see the market just be extremely strong tomorrow, that is going to have a completely different effect on how the market performs throughout the rest of the week, as opposed to if we open up tomorrow and everyone is just, panic selling and, Nvidia is down another 10%. So it's like, if we see more panic selling, that is only going to increase fear and make the situation even worse. And the same thing goes in the bullish direction. So it's really understanding that, we are at a point right now where there are going to be some big moves. There's going to be a lot of craziness, and there are some major events on the horizon, and you have to be willing to adapt to that if you want to succeed in this environment, because there is uncertainty, and that isn't a bad thing, especially considering that it's during times like this one where the biggest, best opportunities are presented, not only in the short term, but also eventually for dip buys. So be ready for some craziness, and it is going to be a great time to be a trader. I am so excited for these next couple of weeks, and I will definitely keep an extra close eye on that $600 level on SPY, Tom. It's crazy to say we're already back below it.
I know, right? And I was even looking today, Mike, like we saw the SPY drop off a lot. And like, what do we look at a lot whenever the SPY in the market starts to dip? We look at some of these ETFs like SPXS or SQQQ, which can take advantage of the SPY and the QQQ falling down, but also even the UVXY, which follows VIX. It was up over 10% today. And, you know, I thought that this was interesting. We actually have some good seasonality on the VIX here, which shows that in this time of the market or this time of the year, we do start to see VIX uptick a little bit. You can see around the end of January, beginning of February, we start to see VIX uptick. Then around the middle of February, it falls back down. And then around the end of February into March, it jumps up a lot more. So I'm definitely going to keep that in mind for the next week or so, that we're normally seeing this uptick with VIX here. And then especially around the end of February into March, I mean, that's some pretty striking seasonality here.
Yeah, that's giant. And for those of you who don't know, VIX is essentially something where the more fear and panic there is in the market, the more it goes up. And as you might be able to guess, it had a pretty good update today. You can trade VIX the easiest by looking at ticker symbol UVXY. And like Tom mentioned, it does have some pretty good seasonality around this time of year. So keep a close eye on this one going forward. And besides that, Tom, let's get right into some setups and predictions. A stock that is definitely close on my radar is Google with an L, and it is to the downside because we have to go with the Class A shares, not the Class C. But either way, looking at Google, it has giant resistance at that $200 level, and it definitely sold off in a pretty hard way today, given today's bad news. I would like to see Google retest that $187 area. I'm looking at this solely based off of just like price action and momentum. This $200 resistance has been like a brick wall, and we're starting to see the stock, like, I don't even want to say slowly, it is rolling over, and I would not be surprised if we saw a continuation of this. Either way, Google is on my bearish radar for the short term.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen a $200 to like $202 breakout for this week, but obviously that is not what happened, right? I talked about this one last night, and you know, this is one of those situations like where you just need to adapt down, and looks like that is a pretty sharp rejection. I'll definitely be watching it down with you there, Mike, that's for sure. But with my first play for tomorrow, I'm looking at a bit of a slower stock, and I like to look at this one sometimes when the market's falling, and that is Kraft Heinz. I know that some people in the Discord like to call it ketchup, but whatever you call it, it has been in a pretty big downwards channel here over the past couple years, and it is actually bouncing pretty close to the bottom of the channel, and this is coming, of course, right as the market is starting to get very shaky. This has a strong negative correlation to SPY, and what I'm really watching for here is just a larger move in the overall trend with Kraft. So we're not really necessarily looking for a move tomorrow back to the upside with Kraft, but just in general, off the bottom of this trend, I'm looking for a move towards like the $32 to $33 resistance in the short term. If we can end up getting up there, that would be fantastic, but it could take a few days with a stock like this. It's slow, it can get shaky sometimes, so keep in mind it might be a decent swing in that sense, or maybe even a play with shares off of this $30 support, but I'm definitely going to be watching it back up. It's a stock that can trend up pretty good for like multiple weeks at a time, but it's not one that like I necessarily want to buy and hold forever, right? But whenever you're trading the trends on it, it can have some pretty good runs time and again.
There we go. And yeah, Kraft is definitely a lot slower moving and a lot more boring than a company like Nvidia or Apple or Google or most others, but it definitely did a lot better than most companies today, as it popped up by over 3% on a day where basically everything else was panicking. So yeah, I'll definitely keep that one on watch as well. But another stock that is being watched pretty closely is TLT, and it is to the upside. For those of you who remember, this is a recent big money money trade that has been doing, fairly well. It's definitely trending in the right direction. And we could see that this recent sell-off has definitely caused a little bit of a rotation into safer assets. For those of you who don't know, TLT is essentially an ETF that holds U.S. government bonds. So basically, when everyone's freaking out that stocks are falling pretty rapidly, some of that money goes into safer assets like bonds because there's a lot less risk there. Because of that, the price of the bond goes up, which is why TLT is rising. Basically, TLT is on watch for a potential move higher because of this recent news and change of the way capital is flowing, but also because of the recent big money play and just the recent charting with the ETF in general. Either way, TLT is on my bullish radar.
Yeah, I really love the charting aspect here. We're seeing a lot of talk about Trump wanting to get rates lower and everything. Yields, obviously, that plays a big role there. And we're seeing TLT pop up pretty well. I thought that looking at the charts of US 10Y, US 20Y for those 10 and 20-year yields, seeing them pop down today was a great sign. And you know what we're starting to kind of see, Mike, is a bit of a lower high starting to form on these yield charts right around this 5% mark. So definitely interesting with TLT. I will keep it on the radar for sure. With my next setup, I'm looking at ticker symbol WULF. This was a recent big money play, and I am a little bit worried about this setup, but I'm adapting back to the downside actually with this one, Mike. WULF has been following a pretty consistent trend on the way up, and whenever I say consistent, this one's had 10 or 12 bounces. So it's been a pretty consistent trend on this one. And with that big drop today, that's like an official breakdown of said trend. So I am going to be watching for a continuation down on this stock. And it's not just WULF that I'm necessarily watching. This is just one that had some of the best movement today, down 29%. But I do think that there could be a lot of stocks in the short term that have movement similar to this. Whether we're looking at OKLO or SMR, which is starting to pull back, or even some of the uranium stocks like CCJ, which are starting to break some pretty big supports. We're seeing some pretty big pullbacks out there out of a lot of these growth stocks, so I figured I would definitely mention WULF to the downside.
Yeah, and it's a lot of these stocks that have been rising the most over the past year that are starting to fall the most. You mentioned uranium stocks as one example, and part of the reason that these uranium stocks have done so well is because, as investors have, been extremely euphoric with the rise of AI and computing and everything like that, there's a whole lot of energy that's going to be needed to power those facilities, and when you have the AI and chips and computing sector get hit, uranium is connected to that, especially in today's market. So yeah, there's definitely a very interesting dynamic going on right now where, again, the strongest stocks that have been rising are also the stocks that are leading the charge lower. And I do think that is an observation worth keeping in mind, especially throughout the rest of this week. But either way, I will also keep a close eye on WULF. And besides that, Tom, it is now about that time for today's momentum plays, and with the first one, we have QBTS to the downside.
Yeah, QBTS got pretty low today, right to around $5.20. So if they break under there, then watch them down. Just be adaptable with these stocks and make sure that you see these good breaks.
All right, with the next one, we have AMD also to the downside.
Advanced Money Destroyer. They ended up falling down a lot today. Again, if they break under 112.80 just around the low of day, then watch them down.
Tom, AMD really is living up to its name. My lord, look at this one over the past few months. It has been brutal.
It really has, and I thought that last week it was starting to come back a little bit. We started to see support hold, and then today that support really gave out. So, yeah, definitely living up to the name now.
All right, and then with the last one, we have CCJ to the downside.
Yep, there's the uranium company right there. If they break under 47.37 just at the low of day, then watch them down as well. They were down 15% today.
All right, so we have CCJ, AMD, and QBTS on watch for potential moves to the downside tomorrow if and only if they break through the levels listed. The stronger and more consistent these stocks move, the better the setups become. These stocks are volatile, so you have to have stop losses like you have to with any other trade. Be more than happy to adjust and flow with the trend changes as they happen, not only because these stocks are volatile, but also because we are in a period where we are seeing, bigger, stronger moves from the market in general. So, you have to adapt and flow with those because you don't want to be caught, on the other side of a trend, or at least for extended periods of time, because it's impossible to completely avoid it. But, it's definitely important to adapt and flow with the market as it changes. So keep these stocks close on watch. And besides that, let's jump right into today's $4 million big money trade. And we are looking at ticker symbol SMH. So this is quite an interesting big money trade, not only because it is a $4 million monster, we'll call it, but also because it is directly tied to the chip stocks. For those of you who don't know, SMH is an ETF with a bunch of chip stocks in it. So basically, SMH is a bunch of chip stocks all in one. We can see the big money is looking for this ETF to fall lower as they bought the 220 strike put options that expire on February 21st of 2025. For my advanced traders out there, this is technically a put debit spread where they also shorted the 190 strike put options. But continuing on, again, this is a bearish trade where the big money is expecting more downside movement here. And today's price action is pretty nasty. And when you look at SMH over like the past few months, it has been holding up well, but I cannot say that it has been truly strong.
I know, and I feel like that this current drop here is something that is really concerning today because we started to see a bit of a breakout actually last week. On Wednesday and Thursday, it started to run above some of these recent highs, right around 262 to 263, but there was still some major resistance overhead. And I know a lot of people like to look at these potential gap fills, and it ended up filling this gap here almost perfectly and rejected right off and right back down. That was a pretty bad sign today. And of course, that drop today was pretty rough. I mean, I was trying to go back, Mike, and find a different time on the chart where SMH had fallen down by over 9 to 10%, and it was very difficult. There were maybe 1 to 2 times where it came close over the past couple of years that I was able to hand pick out of here, but nothing really close to today. And I thought that the way it tested and even started to break this support around 235 to 236 was telling. If we start to see more confirmation with maybe 1 to 2 more red candles over the next couple days, that's going to be a very bad sign. So I would say definitely keep that low of day from today on watch for the next few days. And something that also struck me about this play is just the time. It's very short term as well, only going out to February 21st, and that's quite a bit of money as well, $4 million.
Yeah, it's a bold trade because they are looking to profit off of a continued sell-off here, and like you said, it's a heavy trade, and the expiration's pretty soon as well. So either way, keep a close eye on this one going forward. It'll be very interesting to see how this one ends up playing out. But continuing on, we have to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, August, in the StockedUp trading floor, who had a great post today showing some awesome gains. Huge shout out to you, August, and keep up the great work going forward. It is awesome to see screenshots like this one also on a day where there is a lot of market-wide selling pressure. So keep up the great work going forward. If you guys are into short-term trading, definitely check out that first link in the description in the comments down below to get in on the StockedUp trading floor. Doing this will give you full access to our army of trading robots, our weekly live events. You can chat with Tom and myself all day long and access many, many other tools where if we listed them out, this video would probably be a couple hours at least. But it's a place to be if you're into short-term trading. We can see the SurgeBot recap today was pretty explosive as some Oracle puts popped up by 537%, ANET puts 318%, and many other big movers. So definitely check that out. Again, that first link in the description and the comments down below is the place to be. Markets like this one can sometimes be scary, but it's times like these ones where you have the best opportunities, not only in a short-term trading sense, but also eventually you get the opportunity to buy dips that just don't get presented in slow and safe market environments. So it's a great time to be a trader. If you guys are new to the channel, consider obliterating that subscribe button to get our videos recommended to you more often. We have a very exciting week ahead of us, especially in terms of earnings and the interest rate decision. So thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market this week.